Welcome everyone to Bluebeam 101. Bluebeam's our PDF software that we use for both viewing and for markups here at Genesis. And in this version of Bluebeam, there is a view mode and markup mode. In future versions, there will not be. We're switching the licensing system, so that's good news. But the first thing I want to show you guys is your profiles. Everyone should have this flyout here under profiles, and you should see all of these GEI and GAI Architect. You should see all of these in this list. If you don't, please contact the BIM group or the IT department, and we can get these for you. You should use the profile that's most closely associated with your department, as this does control the objects you see in your tool chest, which I'll go over later. So I'm using GEI Electrical just for this demonstration, but choose the one that most aligns with your department. The next thing I want to show you guys is under the Help menu. There's actually a guide to commonly used keyboard shortcuts. If you look at your menus, you'll see the keyboard shortcuts along the right-hand side of the column aligned with that tool. So rectangle, for example, is R, line is L, snapshot is G. The most common ones that you use all the time, I'm sure you'll have no problem memorizing. But if you go to Help Keyboard Shortcuts Guide, it will actually open its own PDF. And there's actually a list of commonly used shortcuts, 3 pages of them. I'm using the thumbnail view over here, which is my default view for viewing PDFs. There's also a page on how to create your own custom keyboard shortcuts. So if there's any tool that you use all the time that doesn't have one, you can make one and assign it. There's 2 pages on mouse navigation. And then the final page is a great reference to use. It goes over modifier keys. Basically, Alt, Shift, and Control have other functions in Bluebeam, and this details what they're used for. For example, by default, when I have this set to 1 full page down here in the bottom left, my mouse wheel scrolls in and out. But if I hold down Control, my mouse wheel will pan up and down in the document. I'm not going to read all of these word for word. I think some of them, the ones that I want to point out though, is holding Shift while using any of these tools will draw a straight line, vertical line, or horizontal line. If I go to draw a line and I hold down Shift, it will snap to 45-degree increments. So read over this, commit it to memory. This will help you out a lot. Okay, and don't save. There are some navigation tools here that I should probably tell you about before we get into actual functions of the program. This will fit to page. If you zoom in and you click the 1 full page, it will fit to page. This will fit to width, which is not the same thing, especially if the page is portrait. And for me, when I have it set to 1 full page, my mouse wheel will zoom. If I have it set to scrolling pages, my mouse wheel will scroll. And remember, you can use Control to change the behavior at any time. I like to set it to 1 full page and zoom with the wheel. You can also split your view vertically or horizontally if you have multiple documents open, or if you have, say, 2 versions of the same document open, which I'll show you later. You can split your window like so, and then when you zoom in on one window, it zooms in on the other, so it synchronizes them. You can change that under View, Synchronized Document, or Synchronized Page. You can uncheck that. And then Unsplit is right there to set it back to 1. Or you can just close, if you have 2 documents open, you can close one of them. All right, so getting into markups. A lot of your common markup tools have very simple shortcuts, one letter, 1 key. If you're doing any kind of design work or markup work such as clouding, you'll probably just use the keyboard shortcuts. But if you are looking for something specific under tools, markup, you should see all of these here. So we'll start with a line. If I draw a line, and I'll hold down Shift to draw it straight, your default settings, I don't remember if these are the Bluebeam's default settings or not, but you have your color, your line style, your opacity, your weight, and what it starts and ends with. So you can change that to be different kinds of arrowheads. For example like this, and you can end it with different things as well. You can also, over in properties, which is the little gear over here on the far right, you can see even more options here. You can choose fill color, which obviously doesn't apply to a line, but you can change all this stuff here. And you can also change the line style. Now, this toolbar and this properties bar are essentially a copy of one another. I like to use properties just because it shows me more detail. And under style, we have these basic line styles that come with Bluebeam, and then there are advanced ones that also come with the program. And then under that, you see Genesis line style. The reason I like to do this in properties is if you choose this drop down, it doesn't show you those categories. It just mashes them all together. But in properties, it shows you where our line styles start. And you can use any of these that we've had set up. Please note that if you change one to say be this pneumatic style, the next time you draw a line, it will be just a straight line and you have to change it again. But there is a way around that. You can at any point change your settings here. Say if you wanted this to be a different color, a different width, you can right click and set as default. And once you do that, any line you draw in the future will default to those settings, width, style, color, etc. So that can save you a ton of time. Same thing goes for rectangles, which you can use the shortcut key R. But if you draw a rectangle, rectangles can have a hatch, a fill hatch. And we have standard ones that come with Bluebeam. And then at Genesis, we have taken all of the AutoCAD fill patterns and we have converted them to Bluebeam fill patterns. So they are all here. And same thing, say if we set one to gravel, fill color to black, fill color, regular color to black. Why is it not? My hatch is red. Oh, there it is up here. You can also right click set as default on a rectangle with a fill, and then any rectangle you draw from then on will have that hatch until you change your defaults. Also note that your defaults will persist from one Bluebeam session to another. If you close Bluebeam entirely, even reboot your computer, those defaults are saved in a file. So the next time you open Bluebeam, your defaults will stay exactly how you've set them. And if you want them back to being, say, an unfilled rectangle or a straight line, you have to manually change it back to that and then set as default again. Some other markup tools, or well, not necessarily markup tools, but another tool you'll probably use a lot is the snapshot tool. Its shortcut is G. I'm not really sure why, but they probably ran out of letters. But snapshot is basically a copy paste for a PDF. If you snapshot, you can draw a box around what you want to copy. It puts it on the clipboard, and then you can right click paste, or you can just click Control V, and it will paste whatever you just copied as its own markup, which you can move around. Also under the edit menu, there is a PDF content button. And you'll notice there's a snapshot here and there's a snapshot content here, as well as cut content and erase content. The difference is that content is considered to be the part of the page that's a permanent part of the PDF, the part that was printed from whatever software it came from. These markups are not considered content. So if you had this line, say you had this over here, and you wanted to copy the background but not the markup, then you would use PDF content, snapshot content. And this time, it only pastes the content of the PDF and not the markup. However, if you use snapshot on that same area, it'll copy the content and the markup as well and paste it all together. Notice this markup is now not separate. It is part of this snapshotted piece of content. Same thing goes for erase content and cut content. This will not work on markups. So if you wanted to erase content, draw box here, it will erase that from the drawing, but it will not erase the markup on top of it. Please note that erase will do exactly what it says. It's gone, it's erased. You can't get it back unless you undo. Whereas cut content, if you just say wanted to move this room tag, it will cut it and then you can paste it. Now there is a way to make markups part of the page, and we call this flattening. There are several different places to get to the flatten command. There's the toolbar button. It's actually here twice. There's under document flatten, and you can also right click and flatten. If you right click a specific markup and flatten, it will flatten only that markup. Whereas if you go document flatten, it will flatten the document. Seems intuitive, but I just wanted to point that out. If you go to flatten, this dialog box will come up and will ask you what in the document do you want to flatten? What pages do you want to flatten? And you can uncheck certain things. For example, if you didn't want to flatten stamps, but you did want to flatten lines and clouds, you can. You can check these things on and off. And an important option here to note is allow markup recovery or unflattening. If this is checked, the document can be unflattened and all markups can be set back to being markups again. If this is not checked, then unflattening is not possible. And once you hit flatten, it's permanent and these markups become part of the page and it can't be changed later. In general, if you want to flatten your document before you send it internally, this should be checked on so that the person receiving it can then unflatten your markups if they need to change them. But if we're sending this outside of Genesis to a client or a consultant, this should be unchecked from a liability standpoint. We don't want them to accidentally move one of our markups and cause an issue. Once a markup has been flattened, I'll just flatten that one, then these content tools will work on it. But they will not work on markups that have not been flattened. Another markup tool I want to point out is highlighting. Highlighting, you can change your color, you can change your width, etc. Notice there's two tools. There's the pen tool, which is what my mouse looks like right now. And once you get close to text, it turns into a text selector tool. Please be careful of this. If you just click your mouse and try to highlight with the pen tool, it works like a pen does. And if you try it on text, I suggest you zoom in as far as you are comfortable with and be very careful about where you highlight, because the way that Bluebeam considers text from like left to right, top to bottom, it's very squirrely is the best word I can use to describe it. If you zoom out and you do this, you can see what's happening here. If I let go, it highlights all of this. And it even highlighted stuff down here for no apparent reason, because I guess it considers this stuff to be below this stuff on the page. It doesn't make any sense. So be careful when you're highlighting text. And if you want to highlight, shortcut key is H. If you want to highlight with the pen tool, just make sure you don't get too close to text there. It turns into this text selector. You can see I'm nowhere really close to the text here, but my symbol, my mouse pointer has changed. So if you want to, you can do that. But just be careful of it. Also under the tools menu, we have stamps. All of these come with Bluebeam, with the exception of these three that have Genesis in front of the name. We have a not reviewed, a record stamp, and a submittal stamp. You can just click, and they are preset markups that have been vetted and approved. You can also change their color, etc. if you wanted to change that to black. Or I may be wrong on that. But you can change colors, but if you don't see this here, then something probably went wrong with your install, but just let BIM or IT know, but these should all be in your list. Another thing about markups, if you did have something like a record stamp that you wanted to put on all the pages in a document, like just imagine this was a 50-page PDF and you wanted to put this record stamp on it, you can right-click any markup and apply to all pages. It's not just stamps, it also applies to something like a line or even a highlight. You can apply to all pages. And if you right-click and do that, as you can see in my thumbnails, it's on every page in the exact same spot. There is no right-click and unapply to all pages. So your undo button will work, but once you save the document, you're out of luck. If you put it on every page, it's on every page. So be careful with that. Once you have a document that's been marked up, on the far bottom left, for me, this little markups button, if you click that, it brings up a flyout that shows you all the markups on the page. By default, they're sorted by what type of markup it is, but it also shows you what page that markup is on. who did it, what date it was done, didn't mean to click there, what color it is, and even comments. If you highlight text, it automatically puts comments, it comments the text that you highlighted, but you can also choose to type in your own comment if you want to. And this markup list can then be exported. It can be printed, it can be PDF'd, or it can be exported to an XML or a comma delimited Excel file. Okay. I think that was all I wanted to cover for markups. Next on the list is measuring. So over here on the right for me, now these, I should probably mention this for navigation reasons. These shortcut buttons here can be moved around. You can right click, show, and check on or off different sections of Bluebeam that you want to see. For example, layers or signatures. And you can also just drag them from right to left if you want to. It will pin it here. You can also right click and show if it already exists. Like if I want measurements here, I can right click show measurements. Even though it's already checked on, it'll just move it over to the other side. I like to have mine on the right. That's a little, you can customize your interface however you like. Now the measurements panel lets you do exactly what it says. It lets you take measurements on the page that will hopefully be accurate. But of course, you need to have the scale set correctly. Now, if you know the scale of a view, such as this is 1/8 equals 1 foot, you can just type that in. But if you don't, you can calibrate the scale of the page. Now, it helps if you have a dimension that you can use. For example, let me use this one here. Hopefully I can snap to this. So if I go calibrate, and it will snap, as you can see, this is a vector drawing. So if I snap to this and then I hold down Shift, as we learned in those modifier keys, and I choose right there, and I put in my measurement of 7 feet, 4 and 1/16 inches, and OK. Now, if I go to my measure tool for measuring length, and I measure from here to here, my measurement is correct. Bluebeam's having a tough time rendering that. OK. If you don't have a measurement or a dimension, rather, you could always, like if you know this is a 2x2 ceiling, you could calibrate this to be 2 feet. You could calibrate a door width to be 3 feet if you know that that's how wide it is. And obviously, if you have a different view with a different scale, you can just recalibrate to measure on that view instead. You can also, once you have your scale calibrated correctly, you can store scale in page. You saw this option here. It asked me when I did my my calibration. That's if the whole page is the same scale, then yeah, you can store that scale on the whole page and you won't have to recalibrate at all. You can also measure things like area, area of a room. It will snap. Not being perfect here. It'll tell you the square feet. You can also change the precision. And it'll give you all of this in-depth information here. It'll even tell you the perimeter, which you also can, by the way. You can do perimeter too. Bluebeam is lagging, sorry. Oops, I right-clicked. And once you complete the polyline, it'll put in those measurements and give you a total. You can also do diameter. You can do, that's poly length. You can do perimeter. You can do angle. You can do radius. You can do volume if you have a 3D PDF. All kinds of things can be measured. Now, you might be thinking, I wish there was an easier way to change the scale from one view to another without having to recalibrate all the time. And there is. And we're going to go to this page. This page has the same view on it 3 times at 3 different scales. And under the measurements panel, there is a section called viewports. And viewports lets you basically select a region and define a scale for that region. So I'm going to do this one, and I'm going to call it the scale that it is, which is 1/4. And then I'm going to put the scale down here. 0.25 inches equals 1 foot. And then I'm going to add another one for this guy. Call it 1/2. And this is 1/2 inch equals 1 foot. And now that you have these two viewports here, and if you select them, it'll show you where they are. Now, if I go to measure, for example, if I measured the ceiling grid, it's 2 feet. If I measure this ceiling grid, it's also 2 feet, despite it being physically twice the length, because it remembers what scale these drawings are. Incidentally, remember I said I'd talk about tool chests, and this relates to your profiles. I'm on GEI Electrical. This tool chest button here, we at Genesis have pre-built all of these symbols for the different disciplines in order for you to drag onto your drawings. Some of them are diagrammatic, some are not. So if you see this little triangle button here, this means that this section is scalable. And if it's selected or if it's activated, you can see it's highlighted in blue. That means the scalability for these items is turned on. These, however, are diagrammatic symbols, and therefore they don't scale. There's no triangle. And these common symbols here have the ability to scale, but that ability is currently turned off. So taking, say, these light fixtures, for instance, if I bring this one in, as you can see, it's the right size. And when I place it, the origin point moves down. I apologize for that. We're not really sure why that's happening, but we are aware. And then if you move over to the next viewport, it automatically resizes that light fixture to be the correct size. And obviously I could have made a 1/8 scale viewport here and it would have changed it from one to another. So if you're doing any kind of concept design work or doing a lot of measuring in different scale views, viewports can save you a ton of time. All right, that's pretty much it for section 1. The second part of my presentation is about document manipulation. So let me close this guy. Let me open this one. Document manipulation covers things like combining individual PDFs into a single PDF, extracting pages from a combined PDF, renaming page labels, rotating, etc. So the first thing I want to show you is how to combine multiple files into one file, and that is under File, Combine. So we go here, and it will ask you, what files do you want to combine? Well, if you have a bunch of individuals open, you can add open files to the list. If you don't, you can always click Add here, and you can select them from a folder, and it will put them into this list here. Now, you can sort this list by these parameters: name, full path, date, start or end page, but generally that doesn't really help you much, especially, say, in this example where we have the A's ahead of the cover sheets, ahead of the general. This isn't the order we wanted in. Unfortunately, your only option is to manually resort this. You can shift select a bunch of them at once rather than bumping them up one at a time, but you can't move to top or move to bottom. It's just move up. So you kind of have to use logic to figure out which is your best bet. If I selected these 3, I would have to move this up 5 times, where I could just select these 5 and move it down 3 times. And then this AD, I want it at the top of the A's, I can just do that. I'll put that one out higher. Once we have it in the correct order, you can use this checkbox to name the page labels the name of the files. If you don't do this, if you uncheck it and hit OK, it'll actually just number them 1 through however many pages there are. So what I want to do, first I want to save this because my Bluebeam tends to crash on me if I don't. If I try this next operation without saving it. I think that's a glitch in my install. I don't think that happens for everyone, but if you want to extract these pages out, you can just go to Document, Extract Pages. However, before I do that, I want to show you one other thing. To rename these page labels, because this doesn't help you. You don't know what sheets these are. You don't know their numbers or names. You have to actually look at them to see what they are. You can right-click Rename Page Label and type it in. But if you have 2 or 3 sheets, that's not a problem. But if you have a lot more, it becomes very time-consuming and tedious. There's a button here on the thumbnails pane, which, quick side note, you can resize this and it will give you more columns. You can also, down the bottom here, change the size of the thumbnails. So you can manipulate it that way. I like 2 columns. Everyone's different. So if you click the Create Page Labels button, you can either choose the bookmarks if you have any, which we do not, or you can choose a page region. And you can choose which pages you want to apply this to. Now, you'll see why in a minute, but I would suggest including all the pages that are the same physical size. These are all 30 by 42, but if you have a combined set that includes, say, 11 by 17s or a different size sheet, this operation isn't going to work. But if they're all the same size, you can do all pages. Once you have all that set, you hit Select on the page region, and it will ask you, select rectangle down the bottom left. It wants you to draw a box. So you need to draw a box around the area of the sheet that has the information that you want to use in naming the page labels. And for my case, I want to use sheet number. And you want to draw a box around the whole area because obviously drawing numbers change length. If there's a D in it for demo, or if it's a cover sheet, it might be longer. So you draw it around the whole extents. It'll show you a preview of what it's going to look like. So the next thing I want to add is I want to add the drawing title, just as an example. So I'm going to do a space, and then I'm going to add, and I'm going to draw a box around this whole sheet name box here, and it shows you what it's going to look like. And of course, you could, if you wanted to do a hyphen instead, you can. Invalid characters, there we go. Or you can do a space, whatever you want to do. You do 2 spaces if you want, and you hit OK, and it will go through. It'll look at all the pages. It'll look at those 2 boxes, and it will name the page labels with whatever information it found in those 2 boxes. And you're done, and you see all your sheet numbers, sheet names over here. Now you can go to Document, Extract Pages. And by the way, all these document tools here can generally be done with a right-click. So if you right-click Extract on this one, it'll default to just that selected page. Or if you Document Extract, well, it still defaults because I had it picked, but sometimes it will default to all. You can extract pages as separate files, which is what you want. And this is the big one here, use page label to name files. So all these page labels that we just created is what Bluebeam is going to use as the file names for these drawings. So I want to put it in here and select. It will give me a warning because one of them has a slash in this drawing title field, and it's telling me that it can't use a slash in a file name, so it replaced it with an underscore. That's fine. Now if I go to my, I realize it's off the screen, 1 second. If I go to my folder, all of these have been put here. So if you need to rename a whole ton of PDFs at once, in my opinion, it's as long as that information is in the title block somewhere, it's faster to combine them all into one, rename the page labels with the method I just showed you, and then re-extract them back out, rather than trying to rename each individual PDF one at a time. You can also rotate pages. You can right-click rotate, document rotate. There it is. Pages selected. You can do even, odd, even all landscape and portrait pages. And a specific, you can do clockwise or counterclockwise, 90 or 180. You can't do 45-degree increments. Not that you would ever want to, but it's not an option. Also, please note that under View, you can rotate your view. If you rotate your view, you will look at the document differently. But as you see in the thumbnail over here, the document has not rotated, just your view has. And this is not permanent. If you close out of this, it will not change. So if the page is actually physically rotated, then you want to physically, I did that wrong. You want to physically rotate the page and not just your view. You can also crop pages. So I think that's under document. Yep. Crop pages. I want to crop the selected one. You hit next. You can choose a specific size, or you can just get window. You can fit the page content if there's a lot of blank space. If you just get window, it just wants you to draw a box. If I can do that, it'll show you a preview. What in the world? Oh, I was doing the wrong drawing. So you can crop a page. The rest of it is gone. It's not just hidden. Control Z will undo. And another cool feature is you can actually export page content to Excel or to Word. If you go to File, Export, Word document and Excel workbook are here, as well as PowerPoint. You can do the whole thing, or you can do just the region of the page. So let's say you wanted those demolition notes in Word. You can export page region, draw a box around it. I'll ask you where to save it, and then it will open Word after it saves the document. Takes a minute. And it even puts it on the same part of the page. So if you zoom in, you might have to scroll over. It's the very small text. This is 5-point font, but it tries to make it look exactly as it looked on the PDF. So you might have to reformat it, but it is here and it is selectable. Same thing goes for exporting to Excel. Page region, draw a box, save. And it puts it in Excel. These are selectable cells. You might have to reformat, but it's here. That works for drawing lists too if you have a PDF of one already. Okay, the next feature I want to show you is creating links, batch links. If you have a large PDF, you can actually turn all the sheet numbers in the drawing to hyperlinks. So you go to batch, link, new. And we'll ask you what files do you want. It's that open files. I don't want this one. I want the one I have there. Yep, next. And then it asks you, do you want to use the file name? Do you want to use a page label? Or do you want to use a page region? I want to use a region. Same thing as the page labels technique I showed you earlier. Draw a box around it. Okay. It'll tell you what it scanned. It'll tell you what the search term will be. And you can hit generate. It'll look on that in that box that I drew on every page. It'll show you here what it found. And it'll tell you that wherever it finds this, it's going to point to this page because that's the page that it found this value on. If that looks good, you can hit run. You can also hit link options. You can make it a highlight. You can highlight these links in yellow. You can change it to a solid line around it if you want to make a box around it. I like to highlight them in yellow. And you hit run. Goes through the whole document. It tells you how many were created. And now, if we go to a different page, you can see highlighted in yellow where all the links are. So it found this on the page, and A401 now points to that page, which is for us is down here, page 7. So if I click it, it takes me to that page. The beauty of this too is if you have a drawing list page, especially if you don't have your page label set, it'll turn the drawing list into a hyperlinked list. And you can say, oh, I want to see the RCPs. I click and it takes me there. So it is a little bit of work to set up, but if you're going to be in a large PDF for a long period of time, I think it's well worth it. It can be a huge time saver. Let me get out of here. Come on, Bluebeam, don't fail me now. This page needs a lot to render. So the next thing I want to show you guys is comparing documents. There's two methods included in Bluebeam to do so, and they're both under document, and they're here in their own little section, compare documents and overlay pages. They each have their pros and cons, and we'll go over them both. So compare documents brings up this dialog box, and it asks you to choose two documents, two and two only. So I'm going to choose this review issue, and then the same document, bulletin 1. It asks me where it wants to put this output folder. It is going to save a file here without asking you, so just keep that in mind. I always have this checked on, split screen view, synchronize, hit OK, and it'll basically compare the two, set up a split view like I showed you earlier with the split view button, and it will cloud the changes. Now, these clouds are markups. They can be moved around. They're just placed here by Bluebeam. And when you zoom in, it zooms in on both sides, so you can see what changed. I find that this is really good for minor changes between documents, because if there are any major changes, it just clouds the whole thing. For example, if this room layout was completely redone, it would just cloud the whole room. And it tells you that the room changed, but it doesn't really tell you any details about what changed in the room. Also, if someone took this view and moved it over a 1/4 inch, it would cloud the entire view, because Bluebeam just knows the two aren't the same. It doesn't know why. But for small things like moving the sprinkler, it's great to be like, oh, at a glance, oh, there's a change here. Let me zoom in and see what moved. So it has its pros and cons. You can only compare two at once, which is one of the biggest drawbacks. But it's nice to be able to get a bird's eye view of the whole sheet and be at a glance see where the changes occurred. Notice that it saved this one as _diff, and it put it in my documents folder. It didn't ask me, so they can build up in there if you're not careful. So I'm going to close those. And let's look at the second tool, overlay pages. So overlay brings up a different document, a different dialog box. And I must have accidentally hit add. By default, it adds the one that you have open. I don't want to add that one. I want to add these two. So I can control click them both. And yes, you can choose the color, opacity, etc. Make this one green. I'll make this one orange. And then I want to remove this one. I'll move this one up. So you have to keep in mind which color is which version. And if they're not exactly aligned, you can use points to align them, but I mean, your mileage may vary on that one. But the original version is orange and the bulletin is green. And you can add, the advantage of this is you can add multiple copies. You could add 5 or 6 or however many versions there are and stack them on top of each other. And it makes an unsaved version called overlay. Come on. What the heck? I don't know why the whole thing is showing green. Usually it shows black wherever they overlap. But as you can see here, where it shows orange is the original, and I guess the green one is what the version is now. Usually I do red and blue and it shows in black. But at a glance here, you can see where the changes are between one version and another. The problem is you can't, at a bird's eye view, easily see where the issue is. This is an actual green. I guess the overlay color didn't work out so well with green and orange. But the advantage here is you can obviously stack multiple copies, more than 2. And the disadvantage is this is not great for small incremental changes. I think this overlay tool works best for large design changes. If there was additions being added or a layout being changed, you could see what the old layout looked like and now what the new layout looks like. Or you could see additions to a room being added with multiple colors as it progressed through the lifespan of the job. So both tools have pros and cons. Kind of just have to think about what you want to accomplish and use the one that makes the most sense. Speaking of colors, there's another miscellaneous tool here called color processing. And color processing, it lets you modify colors in a PDF. It lets you change them to grayscale or black and white. It even lets you colorize ones. I find that to be a little bit sketchy, but this is really useful if something gets PDF'd, say from AutoCAD, and they didn't use the right plot style and it came out in all colors and you want to see it in all black and white because yellow and orange on white doesn't look too good, you can use color processing to turn your whole drawing black and white if you want to. By default, images are not processed, so if you click that, it'll show the preview that this will black and white this drawing. You can also modify a color. It'll show you the colors that are in the PDF itself. So if I wanted to change this green to say, or this blue to say green, it'll even show you a preview. You hit OK, and it will process that color and change it. So not sure how useful that might be, but you can't change colors in images. Like you can't change the green in this picture to a different color. It only really works for markups or vector content, but you can black and white an image if you want to. Other miscellaneous tools include reducing file size. If your PDF is just really, really massive, you can choose this to basically compress the images in the PDF, and it'll tell you, slight reduction in image quality to a significant reduction of image quality. So you can use that to make your file smaller if it's just too unwieldy. And another tool I want to show you guys is OCR. OCR stands for Optical Character Reader, and it's basically used for if you have a scan that you want to select the text in, but since it's a scan, you can't. Like there's no text information here. This was a typed up note that was then scanned in. But if you go to Document OCR, you can choose, yes, I want all pages. This is a text document. You can choose to optimize for accuracy or speed. I will warn you that this process can take a long time on large documents. So you might want to prioritize for accuracy or for speed if it's large, but you can also choose things like skipping vector pages or detecting vertical text or detecting text and pictures. If you know you don't need the text and pictures, you can uncheck that. All this can speed the process up. And then you hit OK, and then it will run the module. You see how long that takes for just 2 little text pages. But once OCR has been completed, now the text is selectable. You can copy and paste as you need. Hopefully everyone found this helpful and informative. Thanks for attending, and I will see you guys at the next one.